The FIA penalizes Lewis Hamilton 10 seconds for a track limits call that left fans speechless. Ferrari boss Fred Vasseur publicly destroys the logic behind the decision. Hamilton speaks with calm fury, it's double standards, and everyone sees it. In less than 24 hours, data, replays, and expert voices turned the FIA's decision into a global embarrassment. When the clouds settled, Hamilton was still there, perfectly balanced on the limit, steering into the slide, finding grip where none should exist. He rejoined behind Verstappen, but his instinct, that killer instinct that has made him a 7-time world champion, told him the fight wasn't over. The Ferrari was lighter, alive beneath him. Through the S's, he closed the gap like a surgeon tracing a line. He was calculating, reading every twitch of the Red Bull ahead. Then, on the back straight, he saw the opening. DRS engaged, 200 miles an hour, slipstream tight. The roar of the crowd dissolved into silence inside his helmet. All he could hear was his heartbeat and the scream of the engine. Turn 4 approached. Hamilton braked late, impossibly late, but his hands stayed still, smooth, confident. The rear snapped. He caught it, slid onto the edge of the curb, grass flying from the tires. It was control on a knife's edge, but it worked. The Ferrari hooked up, surged forward, and passed Verstappen cleanly before the apex. The world held its breath. The commentators shouted his name. The crowd erupted. It was Hamilton at his best, instinctive, precise, elegant chaos turned into perfection. But seconds later, the radio crackled. Car 44 under investigation for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. The pit wall went silent. "Copy?" asked his race engineer, unsure if he'd heard right. Hamilton's reply came cold and calm. "An investigation. For racing." His tone was disbelief without emotion, not anger, just fatigue from a system that always seemed to move the goalposts. He continued to drive flawlessly, lap after lap, while the stewards debated what millions had already seen, a fair fight between two champions resolved on merit. Then came the call. "Lewis, we've got a 10-second penalty." The silence in the cockpit lasted 2 full seconds. Then, quietly, 10 seconds for that? He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just carried on. His pace didn't drop. His hands didn't tremble. "Understood," he said. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Because Hamilton knew exactly what had just happened, not a judgment of his driving, but a reminder that his name still carried expectations, pressure, and scrutiny unlike anyone else's. When the race ended, the Ferrari garage didn't sound like a place of defeat, it sounded like disbelief. Engineers huddled around their monitors, re-watching the replay in slow motion. 10 seconds. 10 seconds for what everyone had seen was a clean, fair overtake. The air smelled of burnt rubber and frustration. Hamilton walked in slowly, helmet still on, his visor reflecting the monitors that now played his crime on repeat. No one spoke. Even the mechanics, hardened veterans of countless controversies, looked uneasy. When he finally removed his helmet, his face was unreadable. Calm, composed, but his silence was louder than any protest could have been. Fred Vasseur stood at the center of the storm. The Frenchman had led teams through chaos before, but this time it felt personal. "Show me the data again," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of computers. The lead engineer pulled up the telemetry. Speed trace, throttle input, brake pressure, GPS coordinates. Vasseur's eyes narrowed. "He lost time," he muttered, pointing at the graph. "He lost time." Around the table, heads nodded. The data didn't lie. Hamilton had gone wide, lost grip on the grass, and yet somehow managed to keep the car under control without gaining a single millisecond. The numbers painted the truth, but the FIA had already written the story. Hamilton finally spoke, his tone steady and deliberate. "We all saw it. I went wide, I came back clean. No contact, no gain." He paused, looking up at the screen. "If that's a penalty now, then we might as well stop racing." The words hung in the air. He wasn't shouting, but the conviction behind every syllable hit like a hammer. It wasn't defiance, it was logic. They told us to race hard but fair. I did both. Will they want perfection or obedience? The younger engineers looked at him like a man who had just voiced what they all felt but didn't dare say. Vasseur exhaled, jaw tight. "It's not about perfection," he said. "It's about control." He turned to his team. "They've set a precedent tonight, one that punishes judgment. If Lewis can't make that move, nobody can." He slammed his hand lightly against the table, the sound echoing through the room. "We'll go public. This can't stand." He looked at Hamilton. "Are you with me?" The answer came instantly, always. There was no hesitation, no politics, just trust. In that moment, Vasseur understood something every great team principal eventually realizes. Lewis Hamilton doesn't need defending. He needs the truth amplified. The debrief continued deep into the night. Engineers prepared a full technical breakdown for the FIA, frame by frame, proving that Hamilton had lost traction and speed in the maneuver. The numbers were bulletproof, but so was Hamilton's composure. As they went through the data, he didn't dwell on the unfairness. He focused on the detail. "Next time I leave 2 extra feet," he said quietly. "They can't accuse me of anything if I'm miles away." Vasseur smiled, half proud, half furious. "You shouldn't have to do that," he said. Hamilton looked back at him with that calm, razor-sharp gaze. "Maybe, but I'll still win." By midnight, the plan was set. Ferrari would go public with the data, and the statement not as an act of revenge, but as a line in the sand. When Vasseur and Hamilton walked out of the garage, the paddock lights were dimming, the smell of fuel and rubber still thick in the air. "They'll say we're overreacting," said Vasseur. "Let them," Hamilton replied. "History always sides with the truth." The Frenchman stopped for a second, looking at his driver. "You know," he said, "I've worked with many champions, but you're the only one who fights with numbers and dignity at the same time." Hamilton smiled faintly. "That's because I've had to." The morning after the Mexican Grand Prix, the Ferrari factory in Maranello was unusually quiet. Normally, Monday mornings buzzed with optimism and chatter, but this one felt different. The penalty from the FIA had shaken everyone. Inside the engineering control room, the lights were dimmed, and the air hummed with the soft rhythm of processors analyzing terabytes of data. On the main screen, a replay of Hamilton's maneuver looped in silence. Frederick Vasseur stood at the back of the room, watching like a hawk, while the technical team dissected every millisecond of the incident. "All right," he said finally, "let's see what the truth looks like." The head of performance analysis began the breakdown. On one side of the split screen, Hamilton's onboard footage, the steering input, the moment he hit the grass, the slide, the correction, the recovery. On the other side, the telemetry, throttle at 47%, brake release, delta time, lost 0.34 seconds slower than Verstappen on exit. He lost time, the engineer said firmly. That's not a game. The penalty makes no mathematical sense. The numbers scrolled across the screen, absolute and unarguable. Even in a sport obsessed with precision, this was black and white. Vasseur didn't blink. "Send it to the FIA," he said, "and copy the press office." Hamilton arrived halfway through the meeting, calm as ever, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak at first. He just watched the footage slow motion, frame by frame, every detail of his own driving reflected on the screen. Then he pointed at a graph. "That's where it happens," he said. "The rear lost bite when I touched the grass. I backed off instinctively just enough to stabilize. If I hadn't, I'd have spun." The engineers nodded. One of them whispered, "He's describing the data like he's reading it." Another replied quietly, "He doesn't need the data, he feels it." That was the thing about Hamilton. His instinct was telemetry in human form. Vasseur turned toward him. "They claim you gain a lasting advantage. From what we see, you actually lost it." Hamilton nodded slowly. "I know," he said. "That's what frustrates me. They don't look at intent, they look at the rulebook and stop thinking." His tone wasn't angry, just tired, the voice of a man who had seen this pattern too many times. They forget that racing isn't black and white. It's judgment, it's feel. I went wide to avoid contact, not to cheat the corner. And for that, they penalized the race. His words hung in the air. Vasseur's expression hardened. "Then we'll remind them what racing looks like," he said. Later that afternoon, the engineers prepared a full forensic report, over 100 pages of graphs, comparative footage, and analysis. They included heat maps of tire temperature, brake pressure decay, and traction loss. The conclusion was irrefutable. Hamilton's off-track moment had cost Ferrari performance, not enhanced it. Vasseur had it printed and bound old-school style and placed it on his desk with one phrase on the cover, evidence of integrity. When the FIA received it, there was silence. No acknowledgement, no rebuttal, just the kind of bureaucratic stillness that follows when someone has been cornered by their own data. Meanwhile, the story was spreading. Sky Sports F1 ran a dedicated segment titled "The Data That Shamed the Stewards." Martin Brundle analyzed it live on air, saying, "You can't argue with the numbers. Hamilton's driving was pure car control. That's what the sport should celebrate, not penalize." Ted Kravitz added, What's fascinating is how quickly Lewis predicted everything the data later confirmed. That's not emotion, that's experience, that's intellect. Across the Atlantic, ESPN echoed the same sentiment. In an era dominated by algorithms, Hamilton remains the human equation that can't be replicated. Back at Maranello, as the team watched the coverage, Vasseur turned to his engineers. "He's right," he said softly. "The sport has forgotten what it feels like to race." Hamilton, who was sitting nearby, smiled faintly. "They'll remember," he said. "They always do." His words weren't a boast, they were a promise. Because in Formula One, legends don't win by shouting the loudest. They win by letting the truth echo on its own. And in this case, the echo was undeniable. Hamilton hadn't just outdriven his rivals, he had outclassed the system itself.